Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Nature is trying to kill you at every turn, from explosive trees to poisonous frogs, even deadly quicksand. Here are some of the most dangerous things found in nature. The sandbox tree. The sandbox tree is the last tree that you want growing on your property. It's considered one of the most dangerous plants on Earth. Why? Because it produces living grenades. The sandbox tree even looks dangerous, towering up to 130 feet tall, and it's covered in what look like natural spikes. It looks like if you touch this tree, you'd come away with holes in your hands, but it isn't the spikes along its trunk that are so dangerous. The female flowers produced by the tree are its real danger. The tree's flowers, which don't have petals and look like small red umbrellas, create a pumpkin-shaped fruit. The fruit is very small enough that you can fit a handful of them in your hand. And the fruit should definitely never be eaten because it is extremely poisonous. You should also never hold the fruit in your hands because each piece of fruit explodes like a stick of dynamite. You might think I'm being dramatic, but this is 100% true. The fruit of the sandbox tree, aka Hura crepitans, explodes with the force of Mother Nature herself. When the fruit is picked and becomes ripe, it explodes into segments and shoots shrapnel in all directions. Seeds and bits of fruit are hurled through the air at 150 miles per hour. Where this thing grows in the Amazon jungle and some parts of South Africa, locals call it the dynamite tree. The vampire vine. There is an extraordinarily vicious plant in Nicaragua known as the devil's snare. The plant can supposedly suck the blood from living animals like a botanical vampire, but the stories of this plant are hard to find, and no physical evidence of its existence has ever been uncovered. According to the stories, the devil's snare, also called the vampire vine, can be found in the deepest reaches of Nicaragua's swamps. It's been described as looking like a green octopus with many slimy tendrils. It was originally described in an unknown year by one Mr. Dunstan, a naturalist who spent 2 years studying plants and animals in the region. According to the obscure account, Dunstan came across it near Lake Nicaragua. His dog, whom he loved as his trusty sidekick, was ensnared by a plant the likes of which Dunstan had never seen before. Roots the size of ropes snagged his helpless dog and started draining the life from it. Dunstan was able to save his canine companion before it was too late, but it was a very close call. The dog was highly disoriented afterward and covered in blood. The dog was also covered in raw spots. It looked like the pup had been attacked by a bloodthirsty vacuum. Dunstan surmised the vine had somehow been sucking the blood out of his dog. But could there really be a blood-sucking plant living in the Central American swamplands? It is entirely possible, even if it does sound fictitious. Dunstan's account likely comes from the 19th century. Other mysterious accounts of vegetable serpents appeared around the same time, told by European explorers in new realms. There also is a real, verified plant that acts as a vampire. The daughter plant is sometimes called the vampire plant for its parasitic attributes. It doesn't necessarily suck blood, but it does attach itself to other plants and suck nutrients from them. The vine of the daughter plant will wind itself around a healthy plant stalk, then slowly suck the water out of it. This is the real-life vampire of the plant world. It's not at all crazy to imagine a plant could develop the ability to suck blood instead of water from a living host. And now for number 7. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Nilly Bobel and Danis May for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button to join the Origins Explained family. Cinnabar. Plants are not the only dangerous things in the natural world. Sometimes rocks can kill as well. There is a particular mineral, the color of blood, that is so toxic, just handling it can cause death. It's called cinnabar, and it has been used in a wide variety of applications throughout human history. It's typically reddish-orange in color, though it can also be deep purplish red. When broken down into a pigment, cinnabar is called vermilion. It was used as paint during the Renaissance period in Europe. Cultures started mining cinnabar as early as 3,000 years ago. Its pigment was used for makeup, decorating ceramics, and painting human bones. Stone Age people even used it to tattoo one another, while folks in the Middle Ages used it as ink. In the Near East and in Mesoamerica, cultures use cinnabar in their cosmetics as rouge. Now, I know what you're thinking. If cinnabar was used so frequently, how could it possibly be deadly? Cinnabar is not going to kill you if you touch its raw form. Even in pigmented form, it isn't dangerous. The deadliness only comes if the cinnabar gets hot. When the temperature rises, cinnabar releases an extraordinarily dangerous mercury vapor. When inhaled, mercury can kill you. Cinnabar is a really unique material. Mercury is technically trapped inside of it, locked behind sulfur. It's totally safe until the cinnabar gets warm. Then the mercury escapes like a poison fog. Sometimes you can even find a piece of cinnabar with droplets of mercury on it, and mercury in its pure form is highly toxic. Just touching it is dangerous, because the mercury can be absorbed into the human body. The blue-ringed octopus. I can't talk about the deadliest things in nature without briefly mentioning the blue-ringed octopus. You may have heard of the creature before because it's considered one of the most toxic animals in the world. It's definitely in the top 5 most venomous sea creatures known to science. The octopus is stunning to look at. They have iridescent blue rings across their bodies that make them look like little cosmic cephalopods. But do not be fooled by their adorable appearance. One touch could send you straight to your grave. The small octopuses live in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. You can usually find them hanging out in coral reefs or living it up in seagrass. They come out at night to hunt crustaceans and devour tiny fish. You are unlikely to ever encounter one, but hypothetically, if you ever did, and you were bitten, let me take you through what could happen. In the octopus's salivary glands are symbiotic bacteria that produce tetrodotoxin. It's the worst toxin imaginable, a substance that blocks nerve impulses. It stops your muscles from working, which is bad news for trying to breathe. Tetrodotoxin is about 1,000 times more toxic than cyanide. So that should give you a pretty good idea of the deadliness here. The tiniest bite from this cute octopus can cause almost instantaneous respiratory failure as your muscles are paralyzed, unable to move or breathe, joined by the fact that you were in the ocean when you were bitten, results in certain death. Quicksand. Quicksand is one of the scariest things in nature, but is it as dangerous as movies have made us believe? The answer is more complicated than you might expect. Let me start by explaining what quicksand is. A pit of quicksand is a patch of ground that's been liquefied by water saturation. Any kind of sand or grainy soil that has taken on a lot of water can become liquefied, turning this solid ground into a soupy abyss. It can occur anywhere in the world, given the right conditions. If you walk over to your local park after a devastating rainstorm, you could find yourself getting stuck in quicksand. If you go to the beach after a very hard rain or after a high tide, sometimes you'll notice the sand sucking your bare feet down alarmingly deep. That is a type of quicksand. It mostly happens after floods and earthquakes. The reason quicksand is so dangerous is because the liquefied earth can no longer support weight. The sand or dirt particles have been forced apart, meaning they can't support a human body anymore. When you step onto quicksand, you fall into it because it's basically mush. However, quicksand doesn't truly swallow you whole. The human body is denser than quicksand, so you won't sink if you relax. You'll float, but you won't be aggressively slurped into the quicksand like it's trying to swallow you. That being said, you can indeed drown in quicksand, but you'd have to be really silly to do it. If you were to panic and flail your arms and legs, you would be burying yourself deeper in the quicksand. The only way to get unstuck is to be perfectly calm. Only then will you rise to the surface, so good luck! Castor beans. The castor bean plant is a perennial native to Africa, the Mediterranean, and India, but it's a popular plant for gardeners in warm regions of America too. Although it's called a bean plant, it doesn't produce beans. It produces seeds that can kill you. You may have seen the castor bean plant growing somewhere and not even know it. It's a beautiful plant, so private gardens do like to have them around. You won't find it in any public botanical gardens though, because of how deadly they are. According to plant expert Amy Stewart, it only takes about 3 seeds to kill a person. But there aren't very many deaths because people aren't crazy enough to put the seeds in their mouths. Even if you don't know anything about plants, you likely know what castor oil is. The oil is made from the same seeds produced by this plant, but castor oil isn't poisonous in the slightest. The only time castor seeds are deadly is when they are crushed or chewed. which causes them to release a toxic compound called ricin. You might remember ricin from Breaking Bad or from Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot. Ricin shouldn't even exist in the natural world. When the substance gets into the human body, it begins attacking cells on a microscopic level. The ricin attacks your cells so that they cannot create proteins. This stops your cells from functioning, which ultimately leads to deaths. But like I said already, death is only a possibility if you find a plant, harvest its seeds, then chew them and swallow them. You would have to really go out of your way to do that. Here's a little tidbit you might find interesting. Bulgarian writer Georgy Markov was shot in the leg with a ricin-infused pellet. He thought he only had a flesh wound, but over a few days, the ricin in his system slowly killed him. The substance extracted from these seeds is one of the most dangerous ingredients in bioweapons. Deadly nightshade. Nightshade is a plant synonymous with witches, alchemists, and deadly brews. But what you might not know is that you yourself have eaten nightshades at some point during your life. There are about 2,700 different shades of nightshade, including familiar plants like tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. Nightshade in its various forms can be found on every single continent except for Antarctica. One of the most valuable nightshades is tobacco, which of course has had a massive influence on global trade. But what about the dangerous nightshades? What about the ones that have been used for centuries as poison? Some forms of nightshade are more annoying than poisonous. For example, poison sumac that grows in stagnant water. It has little white berries on it and can cause a rash like poison ivy. The deadliest nightshade of them all is a plant called Atropa belladonna, or just belladonna for short. A single berry from the plant can kill a child. 10 berries or a single leaf is enough to kill an adult. Because belladonna is native to northwest Africa and parts of Europe, the Romans learned of its deadly traits early on. For over 2,000 years, it's been used as a poison to eliminate political rivals. The legendary general Hannibal famously used belladonna in 184 BC to poison enemy troops in battle. The poison even shows up in Shakespeare's Macbeth. The poison frog. It's always the adorable creatures that are the most poisonous. Poison dart frogs, also known as poison arrow frogs, are extraordinarily bright amphibians. They are the brightest frogs in the world, making them easy to spot in the wet forests of Central and South America. They are not naturally toxic, but secrete toxins due to the food they eat. There are a lot of species of poison dart frogs. However, only 3 documented species are deadly enough that indigenous tribes use their secretions to coat their arrows in poison. The deadliest of them all is the tiny golden frog. It secretes a toxin called batrachotoxin. It is significantly deadlier than tetrodotoxin, the toxin found in the blue-ringed octopus's salivary glands. Exposure to the toxin results in horrific convulsions. This is usually followed by heart failure and suffocation, all within just 10 minutes. People who mess with the poison dart frog don't typically live to tell the tale. The more remarkable part is how the frogs become so dangerous to begin with. Researchers think it's because of the bugs that they eat, yet they don't eat any toxic bugs. The frog's favorite grubs eat plants which contain the toxin. Then the frogs eat the bugs, and the toxin is passed on to them. The frogs secrete it through their skin, poisoning anyone foolish enough to touch them. Water hemlock. Most of the terrifying natural things I've shown you today are found in more exotic parts of the world. I'd now like to introduce you to one of the deadliest plants in North America. It's called water hemlock, and it's responsible for accidentally poisoning a significant number of people. Every single part of water hemlock is poisonous. The leaves, the stems, everything. But it's the roots that are super lethal. If for some crazy reason you were to dig up the plant's roots and chew on them, you'd almost certainly die. Chewing the hemlock's roots can cause everything from nausea to delirium, to the total collapse of the central nervous system and death. Water hemlock is typically found in marshes and along the edges of streams. It grows in natural parks across the US, unbeknownst to most of the population. Out of all the plants in America, water hemlock is responsible for more accidental livestock deaths than most. The problem is that animals don't realize they're grazing on hemlock, then they suddenly drop dead. If you see a plant in a watery area with umbels of small white flowers, be sure to keep your distance. While I'm on the subject, I should advise you not to put any strange plants you find in the forest in your mouth. If you don't know what it is, don't touch it. One touch or one nibble, might just be the end of you. Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. World's biggest potted plant. Some things have to work their entire lives for greatness, and other things have it thrust upon them by chance. In the case of the world's biggest potted plant, it appears that this distinction came about entirely by accident. The Highgate Cemetery in London has a circle of mausoleums called the Circle of Lebanon, which encloses an old cedar of Lebanon tree. These are large trees with tall trunks and massive irregular spreading branches. They hold religious significance as they are mentioned several times in the Bible. The circle at Highgate Cemetery acts as a pot around the large cedar, giving it a title it never thought it would bear. The tree had been living in the area before people turned it into a cemetery. By the time they began development in 1830, it had already been around for 100 to 150 years. Cedars can reach 130 feet in height, with a big trunk up to 8 feet in diameter. They are usually dark gray or blackish brown, and their first-order branches are ascending in young trees, and the second-order branches are dense and grow in a horizontal plane. The crown is conical when young and becomes broader with age. Solomon used cedar wood to build Jerusalem, and Emperor Hadrian made them royal domain so people would stop cutting them down. While it started out as a cedar of Lebanon, the surrounding tombs have forced it to act more like a bonsai tree, with its roots limited to the pot. However, in 2019, researchers discovered that the old cedar had evidence of significant decay. They're looking for a replacement right now, but until then, we can all respect the old cedar's time as the biggest potted plant in the world. Widest tree in the world. We've all taken a break under the shade that a big tree provides, but what if you could relax underneath a tree's canopy the size of an entire city block? As it turns out, you can do that underneath the Great Banyan Tree. Located in the Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose Botanical Garden around Calcutta, India, the Great Banyan Tree is the widest tree in the entire world, spanning around 3.5 acres. That could cover a small neighborhood. The tree has been alive for over 250 years, but not without its fair share of struggles. In the 1800s, a couple of cyclones attacked the tree, and then it was struck by lightning in 1925, sparking an influx of fungus that forced experts to lay the banyan tree's trunk to waste. However, the canopy of the tree remained and was able to stay alive in spite of all the chaos and challenges life has thrown at it. In fact, when officials built a road around the tree, the banyan just kept on growing, which it continues to do to this day. From afar, the tree looks like a forest unto itself. But if you get closer, you can see the interconnectedness between all of its parts. The Great Banyan Tree stands as a testament to the durability of life against all the odds. World's biggest Ginkgo biloba tree. Ginkgo biloba trees have long been used in ancient medicine, but they've been around for much longer than we've been putting them to good use. Scientists think they've been around for almost 270 million years. And if you travel out to a rural part of China, its native land, then you can see the biggest Ginkgo biloba tree in the world, referred to as Li Jiawan Grand Ginkgo King. Some think that this tree is nearly 5,000 years old. From afar, it looks like this tree is actually a bunch of little trees, but that's just because of the natural damaging and aging processes. They are all connected at the roots. Legends abound around this tree's history. It has a number of incredible features, including standing at 100 feet and having a circumference of roughly 50 feet. This ginkgo also has a center that is completely hollow. Actually, in the 70s, a farmer lived in this hollow space for 2 years. Maybe a little bit of a low-key lifestyle, but definitely serene. Most think that the tree will die within the next 100 years or so, but until then, this ginkgo shows that trees can stand the test of time. World's tallest living tree. Although this tree isn't the biggest one in the world overall, it is the tallest. Redwood trees are immense, ancient, and powerful trees native to California that can grow up to 350 feet into the sky and have a width of about 22 feet at the base. But Hyperion, the tallest tree in the world, stands ahead above all of these redwoods, clocking in at 379.1 feet tall. In a forest full of tall trees, Hyperion finds a way to stand out. Just look at how it towers far above the rest. Incredibly, Hyperion wasn't discovered until August 25, 2006, even though Redwood National Park had been around since 1968. That's because Hyperion is deep inside Redwood Forest, and it looks like scientists are trying to keep it that way. Its distinction as the tallest tree in the world has forced them to keep its location a confidential secret.
They don't want people coming in and damaging the tree, which has happened in the past. To be able to understand just how tall it is, the National Park Service says to imagine a 35-story skyscraper that is 20 million years old. That's how majestic and awe-inspiring these trees are. In Hyperion's case, some scientists think that Hyperion could have grown even taller had it not been for a few pesky woodpeckers chewing at the top of the tree. If so, then the record could be even greater. But why do redwoods get so tall? Scientists honestly don't know. They need very specific conditions with the perfect longitude, climate, and elevation only found in a few hundred coastal miles in Northern California. They are resistant to many diseases and even fire. New sprouts and burls can come out and sprout a new tree if the main trunk is damaged by fire. They can also regenerate by sprouting new stumps if times are tough and play a major role in their ecosystem. They have a very particular life cycle, with falling, decomposing trees helping to provide nutrients to growing trees. If they are chopped down, the cycle is broken. World's biggest burl. Many trees have strange tumor-like protrusions called burls. What's a burl? Burls form whenever some part of the tree's grain has grown outward in a weird way, and this happens due to excessive cell growth. Most often, you'll see one of these burls in the form of a large wooded lump on the outside of a trunk. Some burls are small, but some can get out of hand. And in the tiny town of Port McNeill, British Columbia, you can see the world's biggest burl for yourself. The Ronning burl holds the record for the world's biggest burl, and it's nothing to shake a branch at. The Ronning burl weighs around 30 tons, researchers suggest, and it is about 20 by 20 feet. If you go to see it for yourself, note that it is no longer on its original tree. Rather, it's been removed from the Sitka spruce of which it originally belonged to. It must have just been too big of a burden to remain on that poor old tree. You'd think that the biggest burls would come from the biggest trees, the redwoods, but for some reason that's not the case. Port McNeill was a logging town for a great deal of its history, so it is a fitting resting place for the biggest burl in the world. That's why even the world's second biggest burl has its home there as well, also from a spruce. For all tree enthusiasts, this is a must-see destination for you. World's most massive tree organism. Trees are big, but groves are bigger. But it would be weird to think of a grove as a single thing or a single organism. However, if we want to take the scientist's word for it, there is actually a forest out there named Pando that is just one gigantic organism. Of course, from above ground, Pando just looks like any other grove of trees, but if you dig a little deeper, you'll see that its root systems are connected in an incredibly intricate way. This makes scientists hypothesize that Pando is actually a forest organism in a way. Pando is estimated to contain around 47,000 quaking aspens in total. Each tree that composes Pando is a genetic clone of the next, and they're all connected by the same root system. Kind of like the immortal jellyfish. Quaking aspens tend to promulgate asexually, meaning that they just sprout new aspens from their lateral roots. If all of these trees make up one organism, then Pando spans a colossal 106 acres and weighs around 6,600 short tons. It would be the biggest organism in the world if it weren't for a bunch of fungal mats in Oregon. But it is the biggest in terms of mass. Its estimated age is 80,000 years old or more. Some estimates place it at over 1 million years old. However, the coming days don't look too particularly bright for Pando. Many of its stems die with regularity because of the lack of rain, as well as the problems raised by various pests and infections. Because of this, Pando's root system is not regenerating itself like it used to, likely due to the local deer eating too much of its surrounding foliage. This means that Pando's trees could wilt and shrink all at once in a catastrophic event. If you want to visit Pando or the Trembling Giant, it is located in the Fish Lake National Forest in Utah, and you can actually camp there inside the ancient organism. World's biggest rosebush. Tombstone, Arizona is a treasure all on its own. It looks like it was ripped straight out of an old Western movie, and it has the Wild West history to back it up. But the reason that Tombstone is also famous is because it is home to the largest backyard rosebush in the entire world. Planted with cuttings from a Lady Banksia rose, it was a gift sent from Scotland in 1885. It was first declared the world's largest rosebush in the 1930s, and since then, it has just gotten bigger and bigger. The rosebush itself is massive, covering 9,000 square feet. Its twisting center trunk has a circumference of about 12 feet, which is way bigger than your average rosebush trunk. In fact, the only way that the rosebush can stay in place is thanks to the trellis. a contraption made from steel and wood support beams that support its heavy branches horizontally. The same family has owned the property since 1916, and there is a platform with steps so visitors can see the blanket of rose blooms from above. Every year, when the base of the rosebush, or rose tree in this case, is cleaned out, it leaves a new set of white roses in its stead. If you're interested, you can actually go see this rosebush for yourself at the Rose Tree Museum and have lunch. You won't regret it. World's biggest tree. So what is the biggest tree in the world? That title goes to none other than General Sherman, located in California at the famous Sequoia National Park. It's so big, you can't even hug it. Known as the giant redwood or the giant sequoia, its scientific name, Sequoiadendron giganteum, indicates clearly what's remarkable about this tree: its enormous size. It has a circumference of 102.6 feet and is estimated to be about 2,000 to 2,500 years old. Adding everything up, scientists estimate that the tree has some astounding dimensions. It is around 52,500 cubic feet when looking at the volume of the trunk. Talk about size. That would take up more than half of a swimming pool in the Olympics. Even when one of its branches fell, that didn't strip General Sherman of its title. That number comes from the wood volume of its trunk alone. While General Sherman is the largest, it's not the tallest. But General Sherman's height is no lightweight. In fact, it's around 275 feet tall, super tall for a tree that thick around, and it's still growing. Every year, it adds enough wood to make another 60-foot tall tree. Of course, huge trees don't just pop up from nowhere. They need to grow for a long time in order to reach their adulthood. But comparatively, General Sherman is actually one of the younger giant sequoias in the national park. Since scientists think that Sherman is around 2,000 years old, it puts it at a whopping 1,220 years younger than other trees. Why is it called General Sherman? The story goes that it was named after Civil War General William Sherman. Apparently, naturalist James Wolverton in 1879 had served under Sherman during the war. Thanks for watching! Have you ever been to any of these national parks? What's the biggest tree you've ever seen? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on the latest videos. See you soon! Bye!